Hello everyone, Shintobian here, and in this video we're going to be discussing some Age of Sigmar 4th edition. And what I've done for this video is I've put together a reference sheet with pretty much all of the important changes, big and small, that have occurred in 4th edition, as well as all the battle tactics that you can print out and put on a single sheet of paper. And I've included rules from, of course, the core rules, as well as the General's Handbook that will be applicable to matched play games. Before we start, there are a few things that I haven't put on here that you may notice are missing, and most of those things are just things that haven't changed from 3rd edition. So, for example, the priority roll for determining who takes the first turn each round, I haven't included that on there because it's just the exact same as it was before. Let's start here by looking at army composition. So in 4th edition, your army no longer requires a certain number of battle line units. There are also no restrictions for like artillery and behemoths like there were before. Your army is instead made up of 1 to 5 regiments. You have to have at least 1 regiment. Each regiment consists of a hero leading up to 3 other units, or 4 if that hero is your general. If you have a hero with a War Master keyword, that one must be chosen as the general. And which units you can take in each regiment is determined by the hero. Auxiliaries are units that don't fit into any of your regiments, and they must be deployed one at a time. So taking auxiliaries is actually a pretty big risk, because not only does it make it less likely for you to be able to choose who takes the first turn, but also, as we'll see later, you're just basically going to be giving your opponent some free command points if you end up having more auxiliaries than your opponent. The double reinforcing is gone for units, but there is no limit to the number of units you can reinforce a single time. And then for army enhancements, any non-unique hero can take a heroic trait that replaces the command traits of old, which could only be taken by the general, and also artifacts of power. When the indexes are released, there will be 3 traits and 3 artifacts for each faction. So definitely a lot less than there were before in 3rd edition, at least in the beginning, before battle tomes are released. Then we got magic lores, which include spell lores, prayer lores, and then manifestation lores are the new ones. You can choose one of each for your army, and then all of your wizards know all of the spells of that lore. Same goes with priests. And then finally, if your army is 50 or more points less than your opponent's army, then you get 1 extra command point in the first battle round only. One other thing I kind of forgot to mention, if you have a general, you can pick 1 unit from the regiment to gain a special ability. We'll look at that a little bit later though. So let's get into actually playing the game, starting with the deployment phase. And I've included the coherency rule here because that has changed to ½ an inch horizontally. Vertical distance no longer matters. We still got the same thing where if your unit is up to 6 models, they just have to be within ½ an inch of 1 other model. So you can have them all in a single line. But once the unit has 7 or more models, they have to be close to 2 or more friendly models. So you'll have to double up in ranks. For setup, you roll off, and the winner chooses who is the defender and who's the attacker. Defender sets up terrain, attacker chooses a side and deploys first. This is the same as it was before. It also kind of depends on the battle plan, I guess, but this is generally how it goes. I just always had trouble remembering who does what, so including that in here. Then we've got deploying faction terrain, where you start with the attacker, deploys their faction terrain first, then the opponent gets a chance. Then same goes with the units. You can choose to either drop a single unit or an entire regiment. Regiments are 1 drop. So generally the fewer regiments you have means you will be able to choose who goes first, gaining that priority. However, you don't actually have to deploy the units in your regiment all at once. You can choose to deploy them 1 at a time if you so desire. And then after that, you can use deployment phase abilities. So, for example, the Seraphon battle trait has changed drastically, and now they have I believe it's a deployment phase ability where you basically choose your army ability in the deployment phase after everyone has put their units down. The honor guard thing is actually in the deployment phase. And so you choose 1 unit from the general's regiment, and you can give it one of the 3 abilities here. Special assignment gives it anti-something, increasing the rend when the unit charges. It only applies to melee attacks. It doesn't apply to like mounts and stuff. Priority target is pretty good because it adds +1 to hit and wound for all attacks, including ranged attacks that target any units in the enemy general's regiment. And then bodyguard is the defensive option, where it subtracts 1 from the enemy units melee attacks while they're in combat with your general if the bodyguard unit didn't charge and is wholly within 6 inches of your general. So as long as they're close by, it reduces the enemy's attack power significantly. It is to a minimum of 1, though. That is a core rule. You can't reduce the melee attacks to less than 1. Okay, and then below that we've got core abilities. This is important to know because there are some abilities that only affect core abilities. So those are normal move, run, retreat, shoot, charge, and fight. All right, moving on to the start of the battle round. So first thing you do is to determine the active player. That's the person who's taking the current turn. And this is very important because the active player always is able to use all of their abilities first in each phase. And then, after they're finished with all of their abilities, the opponent gets a chance to use any abilities and or commands in whatever order they like. And it goes like that for everything except for the combat phase where fighting alternates. Next thing you do is you determine the underdog. That's a new thing in 4th edition. So the player with fewer victory points is the underdog for that round. And as you see below, they get 1 extra command point. And they also, depending on the battle plan, will get an extra bonus as well. So make sure to identify that. The third step is command points. So each player gets 4 for the round, and then again +1 for the underdog, +1 for a player with less auxiliaries. If neither player have auxiliaries or both have the same number, then no one gets the command point. And then finally you can use start of battle round abilities that you may find in your army rules or war scrolls. There are actually 7 phases in each turn, and in each phase you can use any applicable abilities like war scroll abilities and whatnot. At the start of the turn you choose a battle tactic. This, like everything else, is actually an ability, and it can't be done if the player chose to take a double turn. If you're given the double turn, you can still choose a battle tactic. And battle tactics are worth 4 victory points now, so taking a double turn means you're missing out on a lot of points. But again, that does also affect who becomes the underdog later on. Moving on to the hero phase, this is where you do your magic and whatnot. Heroic actions are gone in 4th edition. But we still have the rally command for 1 command point. It has been reworked. You roll 6 dice for each 4+. You can either heal or bring back slain models from that unit in any combination. And you get +1 rally dice if your unit has a musician. All musicians now do the same thing. And for spellcasting and chanting prayers, the power level on the War Scroll determines how many casts, unbinds, and banishments the hero can make per phase. The new thing here is Magical Intervention is a new command where you can cast a spell or chant a prayer during your opponent's turn. You do get a -1 to the casting. And also, again, because the active player gets to do everything first, that means that Magical Intervention is going to happen at the end of the phase. You can unbind a spell that is cast through Magical Intervention, but in order to do that, you would have to make sure to cast 1 fewer spell than you can. Otherwise, you wouldn't have any unbinds left during your turn. Unbinds still work the same way. However, banishments, which are how you get rid of endless spells and invocations, these can be done by both wizards and priests. So priests can actually banish endless spells now. And you just have to roll equal to or higher than the banishment roll, which can be found on that manifestation's war scroll. Moving on to the movement phase. If you run or retreat, then you will not be able to shoot or charge in the same turn. Running is still the same. Retreating, though, you take D3 mortal damage before being able to move out of combat, up to your movement characteristic. So, yeah, it comes at a price. At the double, just auto running still works the same way. And then redeploy, moving d6 inches during your opponent's turn. This actually counts as a run, as the run keyword. So that means that anything that interacts with running will interact with redeploy as well. For the shooting phase, shooting in general has been weakened a bit, I think. A lot of ranged weapons have a shorter range now, forcing you to get closer to the enemy. Now, we don't have the full indexes out at the moment, but I don't think there's anything with more than 24-inch range. We've seen like the Mortek Crawler, which is like a giant trebuchet. I'd imagine that having the longest range in the game. It only shoots 24 inches. You also cannot shoot at all in combat. which is huge. You know, charging an enemy ranged unit will just completely shut down the shooting, unless it has the shoot in combat rule. Guarded hero is the new term for Lookout Sir. Still functions mostly the same way. It affects heroes that aren't monsters or war machines, while they're within 3 inches of any friendly non-hero unit, though. The hero gets -1 to hit by ranged attacks, and then infantry heroes can't be targeted at all unless the shooting unit is within 12 inches of them. So, yeah, a minor difference here is that you only have to be within 3 inches of like any non-hero unit, so it could just be a single model and still benefit from the guarded hero thing. Covering fire is replacing Unleash Hell for the shooting command. It happens at the end of the shooting phase, and then it allows you to shoot with all of the ranged attacks of a single unit, but you do have to target the closest enemy unit, which means the active player has a lot of control over what can get shot at. You just move something closer, and then the enemy is forced to shoot at that. Also get -1 to hit with those shooting attacks. For the charge phase, there have been some minor changes. There's now no minimum distance required to charge. You don't have to be within 12 inches. But the charge does have to end within half an inch of a visible enemy unit, so you can't charge units that are behind solid walls. You can, however, charge manifestations or faction terrain now. So that's completely new, and that's huge. That gives you a lot of more targets to charge at, now that you can attack and fight manifestations and terrain in combat. Forward to victory, re-rolling charge, that's still the same. Counter charge is the new thing here. It costs 2 command points, allowing you to make a charge during the enemy turn. Again, it'll come at the end of the phase, though. Combat range is 3 inches, but it applies to all weapons, so that is a major change. Again, it means that a lot more models will be able to participate in combat, and I think in a lot of cases less piling in will be necessary, because they can still attack from a bit of a distance. For the combat phase, you activate all non-fight abilities first, starting with the active player, and then you alternate between picking units to fight. And also a minor change to pile-in moves. You now have to pick a single enemy unit instead of piling into whichever unit is the closest for each model. You just pick one unit, everyone in that unit has to move towards that one. And then we got the end of turn abilities. The power through command is quite strong. Basically a unit with a higher health characteristic than one it's in combat with. Deals D3 mortal damage and then can move up to its move distance. It can end the move in combat, like you can't engage new ones. However, you don't have to remain in combat. You can essentially just back out of combat. You can move on to objectives. It's a pretty useful command that both players can use each turn. Then after those abilities have been activated, you check for objective control. Now that Bravery and Battle Shock is gone, the Bravery characteristic on the War Scroll has been replaced by Control. And there are actually a lot more abilities that affect control now. So either adding to your control score or reducing the control score of enemies. Standard bearers now universally just grant +1 to the unit's control score. That's not per model, it's for the whole unit. So yeah, just remember to take all those modifiers into account. The objectives themselves are smaller. I actually forgot to include this, but yeah, significantly smaller objectives in 4th edition. And then finally, you score your victory points. Again, battle tactics are 4 VP, and then everything else, just check the battle plan. So that is the flow of each turn. Let us continue on to chanting prayers, which has been reworked significantly. So you still roll 1 dice. On a 1, you lose D3 ritual points. On a 2 or more, you gain that many ritual points. Those stay on the priest if you choose to store them up, or you can use all of the ritual points you've accumulated to chant the prayer and unleash the effect of the prayer. And many prayers have 2 effects. One that requires a higher number of ritual points but has a more powerful effect. We've got the same reactive commands of all-out attack and all-out defense, +1 to hit, +1 to save, respectively. These can actually be used in any phase now. One important thing to note is that all-out attack only buffs the unit for the 1 attack sequence. So if something can fight twice in the combat phase, for example, it would not benefit on the 2nd attack. However, all-out defense does last until the end of the phase. Then we got terrain abilities, which have been reworked significantly. These are just universal things that apply to terrain. Also, coming with the battle plan, there's a recommended terrain setup for each battle plan. Cover, -1 to hit when targeting a unit behind or wholly on cover, unless it charged or has the fly keyword. You can be any distance behind cover now, as long as the cover is just between you and the shooting unit. However, it is harder for large units to hide behind cover from large ranged units, because if any model in the shooting unit can draw a line that doesn't go over the terrain, then I don't think the target will benefit from cover. Unstable terrain applies to a lot of terrain. You can move across it, but you can't stop a movement on, nor can you set up units on top of that terrain. Impassable, you just can't move through it. And obscuring, you can't shoot at all at units that are behind or wholly on that terrain unless they're flying. And then the Place of Power gives a hero within 3 inches the ability to activate that Place of Power at the start of the turn. You roll a dice. On a 1, the hero takes d3 damage, but on a 2 or higher, they get +1 to their casting and enchanting. Or if they are not a wizard, they can unbind once as if they were a wizard that turn. We got universal weapon abilities. A lot of these existed in 3rd edition. The crit mortal, though, this one deserves a little bit of explanation because there are a lot of different things that could cause mortal wounds in 3rd edition. For this, though, it's simply a roll of 6 causes mortal damage equal to the damage characteristic of that attack, and then the attack sequence ends. And that's it. Companion weapons, this is things for like mounts, like horses and a lot of monsters and whatnot. All-out attack does affect companion weapons, though. Anti-X increases the rend characteristic. I do find this kind of funny how they said that like save stacking is mostly gone. There aren't really hardly any abilities that improve your save anymore. However, there are a plethora of abilities that affect the rend, either increasing or reducing rend. So instead of save stacking, it's now rend stacking. Charge +1 damage, self-explanatory. Shoot in combat. Allows you to shoot in the shooting phase while the unit is in combat. One thing I'm not sure about, haven't seen anything about it, but in 3rd edition, units could only shoot at the unit it was in combat with. However, I don't see that restriction anywhere now, so as far as I know, they can shoot anything in range. Champions get +1 to non-companion weapon attacks, ranged and melee weapons they have. And then finally, manifestations are quite complex. But they act a lot more like units now. They move in the movement phase, they can charge, they can fight. But what they can't do are contest objectives, they can't use commands, nor do they count towards battle tactics. Like if a tactic requires you to destroy a unit, manifestations don't count. You can move through them, but you can't end a movement on them. Static manifestations, which don't move, like they're like walls and stuff, those you can move straight up to them. However, manifestations that do move act a lot more like units when it comes to movement. Like you have to set them up more than 9 inches away from units. You can't move right up to them. And they can't move in the movement phase the turn that they were summoned. Also, if the hero that summoned the manifestation is killed, the manifestation is also immediately removed. So yeah, that is pretty much all of the rules that I could think of. I went through this so many times, and I think this will give you the tools you need to play a game, hopefully, and answer a lot of questions that you may have. Now on the second page, I've included all of the battle tactics, and I am not going to go through them. I think you can just read them yourself, but I think they do look a lot better than a lot of the tactics we had in 3rd edition with the General's Handbooks. Now, one thing to note is that we've got 6 universal battle tactics that everyone can use, and then each Grand Alliance gets 2 more battle tactics. So a little bit of nice flavor there. And also, another important thing to note is that exactly half of these battle tactics are based on movement, like moving your units into certain positions, while the other half are based on like fighting and killing things. So that also kind of simplifies, makes it a little easier to remember. Overall, lots of exciting changes, a lot of things that really kind of simplify and streamline things, so definitely looking forward to playing 4th edition. Let me know if there's anything missing that I didn't cover here, but hopefully this is helpful. I'm including a link to the PDF if you want to download it, use it yourself in your games. Please do so. But that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.